Good morning, Annette Lawler here, founder Lion People Global. Welcome to the next episode of our LT Talks. For those of you who've been watching the last few episodes, we've been chatting with really fantastic consultants that are available for hire within the localization industry. So far, we've been chatting with Olga Blasco on M&A and tips on global growth. We've been chatting with Lara Casalenas on machine translation. And today, we're going to be joined by Paul Doherty. Paul has a long and successful career in the localization industry. He's actually started successfully 2 language service companies. One, the Language Technology Centre, which became a $25 million LSP and merged with Xerox Language Services, and Multilingual Technology Limited, which was the second one, which sold to Perlitz during the dot-com era. Since then, Paul has been managing director of UK, German, Polish and Slovakian companies for Berlitz, Baun, Lionbridge, and he has led sales for Lionbridge and SDL and worked as a strategic consultant for Moravia. Paul is the director of Strategy Management Consultant Limited, helping companies to implement transformative change. So if you just give us just a few moments, I'll get Paul on the line and we're going to chat with him today about customer care. Thank you. So good morning, Paul. We've Paul on the line. How are you today, Paul?
I'm fine, Annette. Thanks for inviting me to talk about a subject that's very close to my heart.
Excellent. Well, before we get into that, given that I'm Irish and we're obsessed with the weather, what's the weather like over there at the minute?
Well, there's a sunny spell. And
okay.
It's been raining. It's been a biblical flooding over here, but it's sunny today.
Okay, good. Yeah, the sun is shining in Dublin too. I'm looking at it, a blue sky, so we're all happy. We have to stay put. We can't go anywhere. So,
right.
Excellent. Well, listen, Paul. I know that you've always been chatting, and a subject that's very close to your heart is that of customer care. So, can you maybe define for us what you mean by customer care?
Well, in its simplest form, customer care just means listening to your customers, listening and responding appropriately.
Okay.
Because your customers are talking to you all the time. They tell you when they're happy, they tell you when they're not happy. They come to you with problems they've got and say, hey, could you solve this for me? Or they give you notice of changes, such as restructuring or profit warnings or cancelled product lines, which represent a threat to your relationship. So they're talking to you all the time. And how do they talk to you? Well, through the normal channels. Some of them are formal, tender processes, sales meetings, project kickoff meetings, post-project review meetings, account review meetings, and some of them are informal, which is Skype calls, emails, a chat over a beer or a coffee. So they're talking to you all the time, but the question is, are you listening? And you would think with all those lines of communication, listening to your customers is no big deal. I mean, what's the problem? The problem is, especially if you're an owner or an executive, the problem is, how do you know what your customers are actually saying to your people? And how do you know that it's been understood and the right people are getting involved and responded to it, and it's been acted upon and not forgotten? Mm-hmm. And to do that, to listen to your customers and to respond appropriately, you need a system which is 3 things: people, process, and technology.
Okay. And why particularly in the language industry is customer care important? What's the difference with this industry?
I don't think it's particularly important to the language industry. I think it's important to anybody who's got customers. Yeah. You listen to your customers and you respond professionally, or else you lose them. But I think it's in the language industry, with very few exceptions, customer care isn't handled very well. Now, that might sound like a strange thing to say, because there are lots of companies and they've got customers, and most companies have long-term customers. So what's the problem? And on the one hand, if you have been doing business successfully with customers, you have long-term relationships, then you must be doing something right to keep those customers. But is the other question is what you've been doing right in the past, is that going to work in the future? And unless you have a way of hearing what your customer's saying and acting on that, then you might not be doing the right thing for the future. And the other indication that everything might not be, the best of all possible worlds is the number of unexpected lost customers, major lost customers. That's an indication that you don't have everything that you need in place. So if you
Yeah.
have,
Yeah, and we all know that it's very difficult, isn't it, to win them, but it's also very easy to lose them. That's the thing. And we really have to talk about retention here. So, how do you retain these hard-won customers?
well, the best way to retain your hard-won customers is to demonstrate that you're continually thinking about ways to make their lives easier and simpler. And that means getting to know your customer. Um, and so if you know your customer, that means you understand the problems they're facing, the problems that consume their energy and focus every day at work, and that you're looking at ways of finding and enhancing solutions to those problems. And that's the best way of actually generating customer loyalty, and that loyalty will help you to retain the customers. So the other thing is, I'd like to say is customers don't like to be taken for granted. They like to see evidence of how important they are to you. And a system of customer care is a great way of demonstrating to the customers that you care, because you have then proof that you have listened to them, you hear their complaints, you pick up on the opportunities they're offering or the threats that they tell you about, and that you can demonstrate that you have heard that and you're acting on it. So
Yeah,
that
and just we'll talk about the customer care system in just a minute, but first of all, I suppose for the executives, sometimes it's difficult. I guess they become removed from the client in a way, because of strategy and day to day and everything else. Why do you think it's difficult to get those executives on board?
well, this is the most executive commitment to customer care is the most difficult nut to crack. I'm going to give you a few examples of the difficulties, but then I'll try and bring that under a kind of philosophical umbrella about culture. And so it's going to take a minute or two, but if you bear with me, maybe it'll make sense.
Yep.
So there are lots of different answers why it's difficult to get executives involved in customer care. I mean, some executives will say, "Hey, Paul, I hired you to look after sales. Go and do your job and you take care of the customers." Or they might say, "Hey, Annette, I employed you to look after operations. That's your problem. You sort out the customer relationship." And of course, they've got a point, but that point has to compete against other considerations, such as what if the person they hired to look after sales or ops isn't up to the job, or their team isn't up to the job, or despite their best efforts, the customer still isn't happy? How do you know? At what point does that delegation of authority become abdication of authority? So that's how I would counter that. I would also say that executives who don't meet customers are missing a golden opportunity to hear directly from the customers what they think. I mean, customers will tell you the unvarnished truth about your company and what they think of it, whereas people that they hire might tell you what they earnestly hope to be the truth but isn't, or they might tell you what they think you want to hear because they've worked out that's the best strategy of keeping their job. So other executives have a total aversion to meeting customers. They rarely, if ever, meet customers. I know of some executives, some CEOs, who have never met their top customer, ever. I mean, can you imagine? You're a business owner. Can you imagine having your own business and never meeting your biggest customer? It's amazing, but the
No.
question is, why is that? And it's not that they're stupid, because some of these are the smartest people I've ever worked with. It's not that they're lazy, because they work very, very hard. I think it's they have forgotten the importance of their customers. They've become detached from their own customers, and they've forgotten how to prioritize that. I have to say also that some executives have no interest in the customers apart from what the customers can do for them. And that's a different problem. Some executives think customer feedback is a detail and they should concentrate on the big picture being revenue and profit. But of course, if you have a major loss of a customer and you lose a major account, then that big picture soon shatters into small fragments. Some executives don't like to get their hands dirty. So meeting a customer can be a messy affair. You've got to understand the history of the account. You have to understand the solution you've put in place, a certain understanding of the process, understand any issues before you go in to meet the customer. And all these are potential pitfalls for an executive to, in their mind, look stupid in front of employees and the customer. And so some executives avoid meeting customers like the plague for that reason. But in Toyota, as part of total quality management, they decided after the war, they had this thing called the Gemba Walk. Gemba means the place where the value is created. It also means the crime scene too. But it was getting executives out of their office, out of their suits and their shirts and ties, and into overalls, and working with the people who were building the cars to understand the process. And that is still part of total quality management in Toyota. And I think it would be good to force executives to do the customer Gemba walk, to go out and actually meet their customers, talk to them, get that emotional connection with the customer. It says, these are important people, this is important to me. Any promises we make them, I'm going to make sure they're acted on. So that's examples now of why it's difficult to get executives involved. And I think, but it comes under a larger kind of cultural umbrella, which is the issues that stem from the culture of being an executive. And so I'll give you two examples of that. So executives like war metaphors. They like winning new business, defeating the competition, landing and expanding in a new account, taking over other companies. They love those war metaphors, but they're not so keen on the nurturing metaphors like building a long-term relationship, understanding what our customer wants, making the marriage of two merged companies work. They don't like that as much. So it's, if I could sum it up in one sentence, is they like the hunt, but not the catch. It's kind of like dogs chasing a car. The dog wouldn't know what to do with the car if it caught it, but boy, they love chasing after cars. and so you can see this in the attitude to winning new business. Executives put a lot of resources in sales and marketing, lots of teams, expensive, talented people. They put the A team into winning the business. They have technology to improve the sales process, like Salesforce. They have a documented process, very strictly followed documented process up until the point the contract is signed. Then it's handed over to ops teams who are overworked, often quite junior people, which means they're not trained. They don't have the experience of dealing with customers. And so, if you like, right there after contract signing, the seeds of future failure are sown. So there's another example, which is which ties into the call you had with Olga Blasco last week. It's the same thing with acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions. So executives love the hunt for a new company to acquire. That gets them really excited. But once the deal is done, the A team, the external consultants, the accountants, the lawyers that all worked on buying that company, that's all disbanded. And it's like, hey, over to you now. Make this work. Here's my vision. Go and make it work. Right. And of course, the unhappy employees of both organizations are just told to get on with it. And that's why 50% of mergers not only fail to deliver the promised value, but actually add negative value. There's another 35% add minimum value. So there's only 15% of mergers that actually deliver the promised value. And I think it comes down to, this is what I'm trying to grasp anyway, or I'm struggling to come up with the answer, is, but I think there's something in that. They love the hunt, but they don't like the catch. There's some things get executives very excited, but not customer care isn't one of them. And I think it's because it's more long term. It's not instant gratification. You have to wait. You have to plan. It's doing lots of little things consistently every day, rather than the into battle and draw the sword and get stuck in, and then
Right.
you'll know next week or next month whether you've won or not.
Yeah, it's true, and it sounds like a very basic, simple thing, but I think it's this year for sure has made people rethink about where they are and what they need to do.
Mm,
So I think
mm,
it's a
mm,
good time to be thinking about
mm.
a system of customer care, which is what you talk about. The other thing that's really important to executives is the investment. So say we get them on board, what type of investment are we talking about to implement a customer care system?
Well, I would say, again, if I was going to do it in one sentence, you have the people, they're just not trained. They're not all trained in how to deal with customers properly, how to interact
Hmm.
with customers. You have processes already for all these things, but they're not documented and they're not very good, and they don't get updated. And you don't have technology, but so you have to. But I mean, the technology is quite simple. It's a web front end to a SQL Server database, which generates emails and reports. Uh, so, I mean, it's a minimal investment. I think the real investment is in the cultural change. Again, it's getting the executive to say, enough. I've had enough of losing customers. I've had enough of not being able to make revenue projections next year properly, because I don't know if I'm going to lose 30% or 50% of the account. So it's saying we're going to get really good at listening to our customers, responding to them. And so having the vision and saying, yes, this is important to us, the executive teams, we're going to make this work, and we're going to allocate training. We're going to change people's job descriptions and roles and responsibilities slightly to reflect the importance of this new initiative, this customer care initiative. I think that's the big investment. It's an investment in that cultural change, rather than, it doesn't cost a lot of money to retrain people. It doesn't cost a lot of money to document process and have them online and to update processes whenever you get a complaint. But it's the cultural change, the attitude, that's the hardest thing to do. And that investment isn't a lot of money. It's mental investment in saying, I've had enough. But it's got to come from the top. If it doesn't, you're wasting your time.
So it's a mind shift change from the very top that
Yes.
will filter
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so say, this is something that a company wants to do and get involved in. What kind of benefits can they expect to see?
Well, the biggest benefit is you will stop losing major accounts unexpectedly. So lost customers nearly always come as a shock and a surprise. And the saying I like to quote is, how do you lose customers? Very slowly, then very suddenly. But it's only sudden because you haven't been paying attention. If you had been paying attention, you would have seen the writing on the wall. You would have seen the signs. And if you'd seen the signs, you would have been able to do something to retain your customer. But because you haven't, all you're looking at is revenue and profit. Hey, went great. We grew 10% last year. Let's stick in another 10% next year. But you don't know your customer is about to walk for various reasons, maybe poorly handled complaints, or else it's been trying to get you to come up with a solution to a problem they've got, and they're asking you for help. But the people they're asking in your company don't know how to solve that, so they kind of ignore it, or they've got plenty of other stuff to be doing and thinking about future solutions. And so the customer brings in a competitor who says, here's your solution. What do you think of that? Great, have 50% of the business. So it will prevent those kind of situations. Some figures I can quote from experience I've had in the past is a 23% reduction in rework. So if you have a proper system for dealing with complaints, where you have a corrective action. Here's how we fix the problem. We have a preventative action. Here's how we're going to stop it recurring again. And we share that knowledge across the other teams so that they don't need to go through this painful process. They can update their processes accordingly. Then, nearly a quarter, nearly 25% saving of rework costs. That's got to be, so anybody listening to this can work out what that would mean for them. And a 35% retention of existing accounts. So there are big benefits. You won't have any unexpected losses of a major account, and that's got to hurt. A top 10 account is normally 50% of your, and the top 10 customers together is normally 50% of your revenue, and maybe the top one is 20% of your revenue. So if you lose a top 10, top 5 account, that's got to hurt.
Yeah.
And it happens more often than it should. And the reasons are the same, is because although that developed very slowly and it was very suddenly for the executive team, they could have seen it and they should have seen it coming down the line.
Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, a company looking to implement a system like this, they could come to you for help with doing that. And it sounds like you've got experience doing that in the past. You've had your own companies. You've been MD for the largest companies in the industry.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about your experience implementing these kind of systems.
Right. Well, I had a small company, MTL. We were 45 people when we sold it to Berlitz, and we had a $6 million turnover when we sold it to Blitz. That was 20 years ago. And although we were only 45 people in an office, in one office, and it was open plan, and I had an office with glass walls and an open door policy, it was my job to be disturbed. Even then, I wasn't finding out about customer complaints until I was getting the hairdryer treatment down the telephone. The customer said, never using you again. And it's too late to do anything about it. So, I mean, as any small business owner, a lost customer is disastrous. It's a life and death situation. So I had this, I've had enough moment. And I just said, I want to be amongst the first people to know, as soon as there's bad news, a complaint or a threat, I want to know instantly. I don't want it to be put up to me on a need to know basis. So what we came up with was, and this was 20 years ago, it started off with an Access database. It became a SQL Server database. As people could put in the complaints. Customer X, there's a complaint, and here's the brief description of the complaint. That's all. And that generated an email. I got it instantly, right? And but what I found was, that was quite simple. But what wasn't so simple was the cultural resistance. So people don't like bringing bad news. And if a project manager or a salesperson said, "Oh, I've got a customer complaint," and it's my account, then they were scared of getting into trouble. Or they thought, hey, I can fix this myself. I'm resourceful. I'll fix it. But often they were part of the problem. Or else they'd make a value judgment on that customer. He's always complaining, or he doesn't understand, or that guy, just forget him. And so I had a very clear message. I said, you're going to be forgiven everything if you put that complaint in the database. You'll be forgiven. The only thing I won't forgive you is not putting it in the database. So that worked. And I also said, I don't want you making value judgments. If you're unsure, is it a complaint? It's a complaint. Put it in. Unsure, put it in. And that worked really, really well. And so I was finding out instantly early on what the problem was, and I was able to get involved if I have to, make sure if it was an overworked PM, other people could get involved. And because there was corrective action and a preventative action, if it wasn't done within a certain number of days, there was the red flag, generated a report to me. Hey, this complaint hasn't been dealt with. There's no corrective action. And also corrective action has been done, but there's no preventative action. I get another red flag. And as that developed, we added in, the people said, well, why just negative things? Why not compliments? Great. So a customer comes and said, great job. Well, what was it about the job that was great? Okay, so let's then share that with the rest of the team so they can update their processes. And then we started saying, well, why wait for the customer to tell us there's a problem, or why don't we ask the people working to make suggestions? They're looking at a process. Hey, I think this could be done better. We had this suggestion scheme. And so that was then bought by Berlitz. Berlitz wasn't really, they thought, great job, Paul, just carry on doing that. But they weren't really interested in rolling it out. Berlitz was more like a franchise. Bound bought Berlitz, and they were interested in the global production process, but not so much the customer care one. It was only when Lionbridge then bought Bound, they said, this is brilliant, and they rolled it out in 35 countries worldwide. So, and the message from all that is you need the executive support. Once the executives are on board, things happen.
Things happen, yeah. But yeah. It's the executives that need to be on board. But just listening to you speak, it also sounds like it's really everybody in the organization. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the organization responds to what's important to the top. So, I mean, trying this bottom up, I mean, in a way, I did it bottom up in as much as I was a country manager for Berlitz. And, I wasn't, so my boss at the time, he just said, carry on, that's great. But he wasn't interested in, he had other bigger fish to fry, I think he thought. So, yeah, but bottom up, I couldn't get it outside of my control. But it was only when it came top down that they said, everybody's going to do that. And then you get the resistance to change kind of, I wouldn't say it dissolves, but it's easier to get rid of the resistance to change. But you find that lower down the organization, especially the people who are facing the customers, they love it.
Yeah.
People come in, so people resist change in a way, but new people come in and they just go, this is brilliant. This is the way you do business. I'll follow it. There's no resistance from new people. And if you train existing people and they can see, they can see that it's helping them develop, helping them become more competent negotiators with customers, helping them to listen to customers, think like a customer, respond in a way the customer wants. It helps everybody.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense. If a happy customer, you've got a happy team because everybody's, getting the positive feedback that they want in their jobs. So this is something that you're doing. You're helping customers implement these systems. Who would be your target customer? Who are you trying to talk to, do you think?
Well, I think the simple way is answer is just anybody with customers who they're interested in keeping. So that kind of makes it big. But I mean, I would say that for our industry, the localization industry, so you've got, there's nobody in the top 100 companies who should not be thinking of implementing this if they don't already have it. And most people say, hey, yeah, we have a process for dealing with complaints. We have this, we have that. And I would say, great, show me the evidence. And once you look for the evidence, you find out that it's not there or it's so poor. I mean, word of mouth, salespeople, PMs go to meet customers, they come back, they might talk to their manager, they might not. But there's nothing documented, or very rarely. And what does the manager do with it? Well, who knows? But I mean, if you capture, if you're told you have to document each of these interactions and you have to put it on this database as either a complaint, a compliment, an opportunity, or a threat, that gets people thinking, what came out of that meeting? Was it good news? Was it bad news? Was it potential future good news or potential future bad news? That gets people thinking. Then you document that, put it into the database, it generates emails. And that makes it public. And if I was the executive, and in fact, when I used to get an email every Monday morning pushed to me from the system with all my customers in Europe, with all the red flags. And I could go, okay, that's a red flag. I could talk to whoever was responsible for making that red flag green. I'd say, what's going on with this customer account? This is my customer. What are you doing about it? So I think people, sorry.
You're grand.
Right, I'll just switch that off. So I think people will say, we've got this, we've got that, we've got this system, we're great at handling customer care, we're great at handling customers. I'd say, show me the evidence.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do that, very few people can. So, I mean, if you take, here's one example of what I'm talking about, right? So, customer satisfaction surveys. How many people do them? Well, there'll be quite a few who can point to an annual customer satisfaction survey. But you can say, well, what did you do with that? What analysis and recommendations came out of that survey? And that'll be a smaller number. And then can you show me the plan to implement the recommendations that come out of the analysis of that survey? And that's a smaller number. Can you show me how you communicated that to your customer and made that commitment that you're going to act on what they told you? Even smaller number. Can you show me the follow-up plans and the fact that you actually delivered on that tiny number? And can you show me the communication back to the customer to say, customer, we did this, and it's an infinitesimally small number. So people saying, hey, yeah, we have this, we have that, we have customer care, we have this process. When you look at it, you'll find it's very thin, very threadbare. Mm-hmm. And so the system that I've implemented in the past and I would recommend making is not threadbare. Mm-hmm. And you can audit the hell out of it.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense. I mean, even if we think about the staffing side of our business and the roles that we have open all the time, so there's much more companies looking for the hunters that are going to land new logos than they are the account managers. Mm-hmm. So really, if they're doing customer care correctly, we should have more account managers and less hunters, because we're growing and managing the ones that we have. But excellent. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time today. It's been fantastic talking to you rather, about customer care, and we'll put up some information on how people can get in touch with you. I've already done that in the intro, and we'll put it up again at the end.
Yeah, and you can also put my LinkedIn into that. That would be
excellent. Great. Excellent. Brilliant, okay. Paul. Thank you so much. That's great.
Thanks, Annette. All the best.
All the best. So thank you very much to Paul Doherty for joining us today, talking to us about customer care and the benefits of a comprehensive customer care system. Next week, tune in. This time we'll be joined by Alfredo Spanga. More on that coming up. You can watch us and follow us on LT Talks on our website, on social. There's a podcast button on our website. And if you want to get in touch with Paul to talk about his experience or engage him in any opportunities, you can reach out to him via ourselves or through his company, which is Strategy Management Consultants Limited. That's www.strategy-management-consultants.co.uk. Or again, you can come through ourselves and we'll be able to get in touch with Paul for you. Our website is www.lionpeopleglobal.com. You've been watching LT Talks, our Localization Consultant Spotlight. Looking forward to speaking with you next week. More on where to find us on social coming up. I'm Annette Lawler. Thank you for watching.